We are in an age of disruptive technology. Online retailers have become a threat to the conventional brick-and-mortar model. Uber and Tesla are working on driverless cars, which will pose significant challenges to the incumbent players in the automobile industry. These are just two examples, but the message is clear. Only companies that adapt themselves to the accelerating change can hope to remain relevant.
This brings us to the most important question. How should one manage a portfolio in such a dynamic environment? There is no one better than Mr. Ramesh Damani to anchor such a discussion. Mr. Damani is a stock market veteran who commands a high degree of respect and is often called the Nawab of Dalal Street. Please welcome him on stage with a huge round of applause.
Over to you, Mr. Damani.
To join him on stage, we call upon Mr. Charandeep Singh, Founder and Managing Director at Girik Capital, Mr. Kuntal Shah, Co-Founding Partner at Sage One Investment Advisor, Mr. Manish Bhandari, CEO and Managing Partner for Vellum Capital Advisor, and Mr. Rahul Rathi, CEO of CapMetrics. Over to you, Mr. Damani.
Thank you. Hi. Good afternoon, and thank you, Morningstar, for inviting all of us from Dalal Street to this panel discussion. Before I give you a sense of where my panelists are in the markets about technology disruption, let me give them a sense of how the house is, all right? So I'm going to ask you a few questions. Audience poll, put your hands up if you agree with this statement. How many of you think that the Indian economy is stalling and needs some fiscal stimulus? Please raise your hands. So majority don't agree with Yashwant Sinha, Kuntal, I think, right? We don't need it, right? How many of you think that demonetization 1 year later was actually a good idea? Popular support remains for that, okay? Finally, a question that we all try to follow on Dalal Street. How many of you have personally invested in a stock or a mutual fund during the past 3 months? This is a bull market if I ever saw one. Thank you guys, thank you very much. Thank you all for your thing. People are bullish, right, Rahul?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Final question. How many of you consider yourself fans of the Beatle group, the Beatles? Yeah, good, because you'll relate to the next thing I'm doing. If you're a Beatles fan, you'll remember the lyrics from their hit song, "Nothing's going to change my world," right? However, in today's world, we are more likely to croon business at the speed of thought, as Bill Gates said it. From the Beatles to Bill Gates' title, portfolio managers and investors are increasingly confronting the all-important question: how do we invest in a world of accelerating change? To help us make sense of this changing world, I'm joined by a panel of young Turks who are taking on the Dalal Street establishment and pinpointing the great stocks of tomorrow. It has been my fortune to interview all of them on the show I do for CNBC. And I realize there's an extraordinary amount of new thinking, different styles, and a passion for investing which they bring to the table. Let me just introduce my panelists to you. To my extreme right, Manish Bhandari of Vellum Capital. To my immediate right, Kuntal Shah, Sage One from Pune. To my left, Rahul Rathi of Capital Matrix and Risk Solution. And to his left, Charandeep Singh of Girik Capital. Gentlemen, thank you so much for making the time and coming here.
Thank you. Thank
you. Over to you, Mr. Damani.
Thank you. Where my panelists are in the markets about technology disruption, let me give them a sense of how the house is, all right? So I'm going to ask you a few questions. Audience poll, put your hands up if you agree with this statement. How many of you think that the Indian economy is stalling and needs some fiscal stimulus? Please raise your hands. So majority don't agree with Yashwant Sinha, Kuntal, I think, right? We don't need it, right? How many of you think that demonetization 1 year later was actually a good idea? Popular support remains for that, okay? Finally, a question that we all try to follow on the last street. How many of you have personally invested in a stock or a mutual fund during the past 3 months? This is a bull market if I ever saw one. Thank you guys. Thank you very much. Thank you all for your those things. People are bullish, right, Rahul?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Final question. How many of you consider yourself fans of the Beatle group, the Beatles? Yeah, good, because you'll relate to the next thing I'm doing. If you're a Beatles fan, you'll remember the lyrics from their hit song, "Nothing's going to change my world," right? However, in today's world, we are more likely to croon business at the speed of thought, as Bill Gates said it. From the Beatles to Bill Gates' title, portfolio managers and investors are increasingly confronting the all-important question, how do we invest in a world of accelerating change? To help us make sense of this changing world, I'm joined by a panel of young Turks who are taking on the Dalal Street establishment and pinpointing the great stocks of tomorrow. It has been my fortune to interview all of them on the show I do for CNBC. And I realize there's an extraordinary amount of new thinking, different styles, and a passion for investing which they bring to the table. Let me just introduce my panelists to you. To my extreme right, Manish Bhandari of Valum Capital. To my immediate right, Kuntal Shah, Sage One from Pune. To my left, Rahul Rathi. Manish, let me come to you. Historically, you've always pointed out to me that Indian corporates have not been actual innovators or disruptors in the marketplace. Given the fact that we are a technology consumer and not innovators, doesn't that give you some red flags ahead as to how investment will be? Because technology will be a major constraint.
Yeah, sure. So we live in a globalized world. And why we are talking about a disruption today at this conference is because of 2 or 3 issues which has converged together. One, that the first time after a long period of time with pockets of experimentation and a maturity level, the artificial intelligence, the robotics, the sensor technology, the IoTs, everything put together is converging. So up till now, what you have seen for last maybe 2 decades or so, disruption was always a technology world. So you have a disruption which go to the Bangalore, which don't come to Tirupur, and which doesn't go to any other part of India. But now, when you have this convergence of technology, the disruption is far, far more powerful, and disruption in the traditional businesses is far more powerful than what we have seen today. And we have seen this, the live example is a retail in US. So suddenly Amazon has disrupted and a whole value has shifted from one side to another side. Coming back to that, Indian corporates have not invested in research and development, answer is yes. If you are living in a globalized world where the trade to GDP ratio is close to, for India is 50%, and maybe a 2 decade back it was somewhere around 23, 24%, the technology is getting imported. When you import a product, you import a technology. Assuming that some point of time, from a theory of comparative advantage, someone has produced this a product at a higher technological cost curve. So you are importing technology. Second thing, which is slightly disturbing to me, is also, and that's a fact which has never been brought in any part of it, is the MNCization of India. What do I mean by this?
Yes.
You came by your car or Uber. You are using either WhatsApp. Maybe you have grown up holding a VIP bag. Today you own a Samsonite. And there is a vast cost, which is the difference between a Samsonite and owning a VIP. If you look at each and every segment, you will find the MNCization of India. What would happen is a traditional Indian, and many of these MNCs are not listed. Samsonite is not listed in India. So traditionally, what you could land up at, it is a lot of lemons in India. So that's where we have not innovated for a long period of time. We have not done investments. MNC can use global R&D power to push its product in India. So what you would land, so the pocket of opportunities will go narrow and narrow in India. That's what my feeling is. So maybe it's quite contrary to maybe many of the people who are sitting here and looking for a great widespread bull run. I would say the pocket of opportunity will go narrow and narrow down in India.
And you're capturing that by looking at, say, trade to GDP? Because
many of the factors. So trade to GDP is one thing that you can import technology. When I look at the way, who is competing against an Indian company or a listed entity, and who is your competitor in unlisted entities. So a lot of us don't pay attention to what is happening to the unlisted part of India. So if you look at the unlisted part of India, which could be a very well global, I'll give you an example about, I stumbled upon this issue that I was looking at a compressor industry. And I did a dissection of the compressor industry, and I figured out the global leader or the most technologically advanced company I would like to own is no more listed in India. It used to be listed in India, it's not listed anymore. So what choice you have? You have 2 or 3 choice. You need to decide whether you want to own it. Whether can I hold my hand on my heart and says, these were the 3s I was looking for? Answer is no. So this is another big change which has happened in India. And this will have a far more repercussions over a period of next 15 years, 20 years. And why this has happened? Because we allowed a lot of MNCs to do 100% FDI through a FDI route for last 15 years. And now you see those companies have got a distribution strength, has got a price point, knows India very well. That's where you are.
Charandeep uses CanSlim,
Yeah.
Rahul uses long-term growth. How do you generate ideas then? I mean, or you understand that business is being affected, but how do you find those positive surprises?
Sure. So I don't look for surprises. I just look for where I could have the lowest downside risk. So my issue is not just to look at the best of the ideas. I mean, I look for the best of the ideas, but not to hit the balls out of the stadiums. I just look at where I could have a situation where I have a lowest downside risk. So I use 2 compartments of while making an investment, or maybe the prism I would use 2. One, that I would look at a companies at a reasonable growth. From a valuation point of view, and usually I would look at, maybe I would gun for 15 to 20% growth rate, I mean to say volume growth rate. I'm very wary of companies or the products or the businesses which have been grown significantly on the value, not on the volume. So maybe to me today, it could be quite contrary to the most of the people sitting in the room, is housing finance is a situation where the housing finance companies in last 10 years have grown through the inflation in the housing prices, rest more on the inflation in the housing prices, less on the growth in the loan book.
Volume growth.
Volume growth, that's right. So I would be slightly wary of housing prices if my research suggests that there is a problem in the housing sector going ahead. So I would dissect that. And my second compartment of looking at business is, I look at fallen angels. A company which has done very well for some point of time, industry cycle has gone down substantially because of some X, Y, Z reason, and there is a possibility of looking at a comeback of those industries, and those have not been disrupted by the technology A, B, C, D, E, F, G whole of checklist, then I would be very happy to own those companies. Because you have as Rahul was saying, you have some behavior pattern which has gone through that whole cycle in a span of 10 years or 5 years, 15 years. And at any point of time, you're buying that stock very cheap and the business very cheap.
Yeah. Never fails at the last street, buy cheap. Manish, let me get you back on this point of technology that he said. You're genuinely afraid that a lot of businesses that India excelled in, say textiles, are prone to a technology disruption cycle. And you gave me some examples. Could you share that with our audience?
Yeah, so what I meant was, I'm in a camp which believe that the society has to produce a lot more value, and if we don't move on the pace with the way the globalization moves, then only comes free of cost is aging, nothing else. So what I mean about that is, there is a robotic facility which has been set up in USA. So up till now what we were doing was made in China, sold in US. What now you have is made in US, made for US by China. So there is a robotic facility set up in US which produce for Adidas, which produces a T-shirt for 33 cents, $67. So what we are talking about? 20 rupees, 20 rupees, a robotic piece of line, and it produces 8 lakh T-shirts in a day. 21 robotics multiplied by all put together. So what I'm saying is that the competitive advantage in the areas which we are basically into, so leaving out the 50, 100 companies, what we are talking about 125 crore population to be fed and lifted back from a poverty line to the consuming class. When I see those kind of big land shift changes, I'm a worried man. Let me give you an example. From 2000 is not far away, okay? It doesn't go fade away in your memory lane. 2000 to 2017, the last industry we heard of some critical size was information and technology, okay, which produced a lot of jobs together. And auto ancillary and pharmaceutical to some extent, yeah, plus and minuses, but those have already emerged now. Look at just the scale of China today. They have produced the solar panel, they have produced the industrial robots, they have produced N number of electric batteries. They are global leaders in electric batteries. 15 industries in a row, what they produce in. And those industries, so that's what I said. There was a study done in Germany which says that among the top 15 industrial robot companies in the world, 10 or 12 are them from Germany. So they were just worried about whether these industrial robots itself would take away jobs or would produce jobs for us. And finally they realized that no, it has produced jobs for them because they are consumer of technology as well as producer of the technology. So you spoke about demographics. I think India need to do a lot more before to produce those world-class companies, world-class competitive advantages. Yeah, eating, everyone has to eat because we have to feed ourselves 2 meals a day.
That's worrying because you're not creating employment even at the current situation where it creates so much employment. I don't know what the number is, 12 million or so.
Yeah.
So with technology disruption, that will be increasingly harder, right? Yeah. And if people aren't there as consumers, what happens to the state of this bull market?
That's what I said. The opportunities will become narrow. Opportunities will not be wide and wide enough. Opportunities will become narrow. So Maruti's winner takes all become Maruti. The rest people could struggle. So look at a minister makes a statement that an electric vehicle is a certainty of the day. What happens to the auto ancillary industry? It's a challenge.
Let me just challenge you on the auto industry. Maruti has a 50% market share, dominant company in India. But do you see existential threat to the company from electric vehicles, self-driving vehicles? I mean, can the whole auto industry change in the next 10 years? And if it can, then what is the value of our investment in Maruti?
Difficult to say. Can I see a 10 years ahead of the regulatory changes? Because there are regulatory changes. Globally, the industry in electric vehicle was supported by the government, even including in China. So would the government would have enough resources to feed subvention costs or no? Answer is no. If you look at the way the cost of batteries would go down over a period of time, you look at the cost curve, answer is this, yes, definitely. Maruti would have far more chances than many other industries to this. And a lot of maybe few new companies may come up on the process. So that's one thing. What only case I'm making is that till you produce, when you live in a globalized world, until you produce a global scale technology, global scale research and development, global scale size on a competitive advantage, it's really difficult to pull it out. It's really difficult.
I think Peter Drucker put it best, if you remember. He said that Maruti should probably think of themselves as not being in the auto industry, but the transportation industry. Yeah. And then they'll move ahead to electric vehicles.
Yes.
If they want to defend, like Kodak, the share of the print market, they could probably be an ostrich in the head. So management bandwidth probably has to come along. If you're pessimistic about employment numbers, right? You feel that long term, we're not using technology because you're not innovating, correct? Do you feel that a concept like universal basic income, you know, where the government gives everyone because they're born a check, is, you know, a solution?
Free entitlements can never be a solution. So this brings back a debate whether we need a bullet train or we need more investments in some other areas which are being. So free entitlement can never be and no society could ever. You have a lot of these Latin American societies which is just blown out periodically because of the free entitlements. So that can never be a situation. Maybe we have to create a lot more employment opportunities. We have to bring those skill set down. So look at, I was referring to 2002 to 2016. So we had one big boom in the mobile telecommunication. So did we produce mobile? Do we have 60% of India's mobile market share is among the Chinese companies, and the pecking order has changed so dramatically. Nokia, which was a global leader, they are not there. We have got a different set of customers. So did we produce mobile? Answer is no. We should have prepared for that boom with some kind of foresight and would have produced a mobile in India as basic as mobile. So we don't produce, we consume. So look at the solar boom which we talk about, and a lot of us are very proud of. Did we produce a solar panel in India? We just consumed, we just imported. We are talking about electric vehicle. Are we producing a battery in India? Answer is no. We want to import the battery. We don't have a battery technology. So in some
That's my point. I mean, so shouldn't the government now think ahead and say, let's go to universal basic income, because employment is not going to happen?
Yeah. No, I don't think so.
We can't afford it, but that apart.
No, we can't afford even, and I think, so as a concept, even Switzerland tried it. They also wanted to give, one of the most richest society of the world wanted to give a universal basic income. I don't think so. That would ever work in our context as a universal basic income. I think what government is doing, bringing a lot of efficiency in the place, yeah, that's good, great, but that can't take us to a sizable India of 2030 or India of 2040. So a lot of these companies which we talk about as become a 500 crore or 1,000 crore, those companies existed and they've just existed now for the stock market. Those companies are not produced in a short span of time. So there's a difference between both of the things.
Shell companies.
No, I meant to say those companies were there in existence, but they've become from private limited companies to a public limited company. So they've come to our fourfold now. So I'm not talking about shell companies, I'm just talking about those companies did exist and those businesses have been built over a period of time. So to make a 500 or 1,000 crore company in a short span of time of 7 or 8 years is very difficult now. It's a pretty long gestation.
Now, Manish, if your theory is right, that say in the textile industry is going through so much disruption by automation, reducing the cost, just would the biggest winner be Zara? I mean, they sell at a price point, people flock to buy them, and the cost is going down. So,
so whenever you look at stock, you need to dissect it. Where is the value sitting? So as Kuntal was saying, the value of that company, of a footwear company, is sitting in the distribution. It is not in the manufacturing. So you need to dissect where the value is sitting, and then you need to take a call, and you will find those values in jewels in some form and shapes and other. When I made a statement about the textile industry, it's not that it is going to hit us tomorrow morning and all the textile companies should close down, but that's what I'm saying, that this is not a situation is coming down, so where you will see the deflation in many of these areas. So there are various ways to look at the stock, and maybe you need to look at the disaggregate chain and where the value is sitting in the disaggregate chain. India is a large market, you have a low price point footwear, it's very difficult for any of the companies to get in so easily. But yes, if you're looking at the top end, yeah, definitely. So if you look at the growth rate on if you're selling those footwears in a mall, so whether that will compete versus the Nike and Adidas and all other areas very well, that is what something you need to see. So what is your segmentation is very equally important when you're looking at the aggregate value chain.
you know, talking about value, Manish, when I talked to you privately, I was very impressed by your thought process. I mean, you figured out that Airbnb was going to be real.
Yeah.
That it was a huge force that was driving the industry out there.
Yeah.
But you didn't bet on Airbnb because you couldn't. It was a private company, right? But you still wanted a way to profit from it. Can you explain how that thought process worked and how you profited from it?
So let me admit it was an accidental discovery which I made. So I still use Airbnb, and for last 6 and 7 years I've used Airbnb in India, outside India. And then I realized that when you use Airbnb, which is your, when you stay in a private residences, what you use is not the institutional bedsheet, which is a white bedsheet. What you use is a printed bedsheet. So Airbnb is on its course to sell maybe close to 750 million room nights in the next year or so. It's a private company, so numbers are very hazy to guess, but that's what the broad numbers are. So you have this replenishment of the bed sheets which has gone into the system. So I realized that the Indian companies have got a moat in terms of selling it to the bed sheets to the US markets, and predominantly the cotton bed sheets. So I was never impressed by the PSF bed sheet. So I was impressed by the cotton chain of India. And then I realized that there is, and that's what has happened finally, that the Indian companies' market share in US now should be close to 50 to 55%, and it has risen. So confluence of factor happened. It was Airbnb was one of the reason. What also happened, that China vacated the low-end space and they never had a huge competitive advantage. So you need to figure out where is the competitive advantage of our company sitting. And when they realized, and then the whole market share was up and for the Indian companies to grab, and the whole the foundation of the Indian textile home bedsheet industry came up. In a significant
Great
way.
level of what we call second level thinking in, on your part.
Fantastic.
It's very impressive that you can think it through. What we'll do, we got a few minutes remaining, is I'm going to do a rapid fire, very small rapid fire, each of them to kind of. Manish, same question with you. Nifty 9,000 or 11,000 first?
I'm still figuring out why it should be 9,000.
Okay. Oh, okay. Airbnb or Uber, which is a better investment according to you, if you could do it in the private space?
Airbnb.
Airbnb, okay. Can you give us a sector that you're particularly scared of that will be decimated by technology, which is not recognized by the market today?
Maybe textile is one, where we have a very low value addition, and we have a lot of stakes on the textile side. Textile is one.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, gentlemen, as they say in the fashion business, fashion fades, but style remains. One thing I'm sure, the investing style that is pioneered by my distinguished panel is going to be forever evergreen. Thank you so much for being a part of this panel today.